Alina walked into the bank, her sneakers quietly tapping on the polished floor. The air inside was cool, almost too cool, and smelled faintly of expensive perfume and leather chairs. She had always found this place intimidating, even though it was just a regular bank. But today, she had no choice. She had come to deposit the cash she had been saving for months. Her bag felt heavy on her shoulder. Inside, wrapped carefully in an old envelope, was Rs 150,000 in crisp notes. It was a small fortune to someone like her, and it had taken her nearly a year to save up this much. Every penny had come from her side job at a small cafe, from the tips she received, and from every little extra she could do. She didn't come from money, but she was proud of the small savings she had gathered. The bank was busy, as always. It was the kind of place where people came dressed in suits, their faces serious, their phones glued to their hands. Alina felt out of place in her faded jeans and simple hoodie, but she kept her head high. She wasn't going to let anyone make her feel less than. She approached the counter where two young tellers were chatting. Both of them glanced up when they saw her, and Alina could already sense the judgment in their eyes. They didn't need to say anything, but she could feel it. The way they looked at her clothes, her sneakers, her simple style. They exchanged a quiet laugh. "Hi," Alina said, trying to sound confident. "I'd like to deposit some cash into my account." The teller closest to her, a young man with a bored expression, raised an eyebrow. "Cash? You're sure you want to deposit that much?" He motioned to the envelope in her hand. "You know, most people these days just transfer money online. It's a lot safer." Alina bit her lip but remained calm. She wasn't going to be intimidated. "Yes, I want to deposit it here," she said softly. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked over her shoulder, as if trying to find someone more important to help. "Hold on," he said. "I'll check with my supervisor." Alina nodded and stepped aside, clutching the envelope tightly in her hands. She tried to ignore the whispers between the tellers, but she could hear their voices clearly. "She must be lost," one of them whispered. "This is a high-end bank. What's someone like her doing here?" Alina's heart sank, but she didn't let it show. She knew what they were thinking. They had decided she didn't belong here. People like her didn't deposit large sums of cash. People like her weren't meant to be in places like this. They probably thought she was some scam artist, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, trying to get away with something. The young man returned, but this time he had the branch manager with him. The manager looked at Alina with a polite smile, but seemed to have a sense of urgency in his step. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking at the teller who had been helping her. The teller hesitated, but finally he nodded. "This lady wants to deposit a large amount of cash," he said. "But she doesn't look like she belongs here." The manager's eyebrows furrowed for a moment, but he quickly hid his surprise. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice cool but firm. The teller tried to cover his mistake. "I just meant, we don't usually see people like her, you know." The manager's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer to Alina. He turned to the tellers, giving them a look that silenced them immediately. "I'll handle this," he said, his tone no longer friendly but stern. He addressed Alina directly now. "Miss, is there a problem? How can I assist you?" His voice had shifted, more respectful now, almost apologetic. Alina blinked in surprise. She wasn't used to this kind of treatment at all. A part of her wanted to feel embarrassed, but she knew better. She simply smiled and said, "I would like to deposit the cash into my account, please." The manager nodded and led her to the side, away from the tellers. He spoke in a lower voice now, almost as though trying to make her feel better. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "I don't know what those two were thinking. I'll make sure this is handled properly." Alina nodded, her mind racing. She had been judged, and she knew exactly why. Her clothes, her shoes, the way she looked. They hadn't thought she was good enough to be in this bank, much less deposit a large sum of money. But she wasn't angry. Not yet. She was calm, almost too calm. The manager took her details and processed the deposit quickly, his attitude now more professional. But Alina's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. She was more than what they saw, more than the clothes on her back, more than the sneakers that didn't fit their idea of wealth. As she left the counter and walked toward the exit, she couldn't help but wonder, what if they knew who her father was? What if they knew the truth? What if they knew that the owner of this bank was her father? Would they still look at her the same way? The next morning, Alina woke up to a strange feeling. It was a quiet Saturday, and she had no plans, just the usual routine. But as she sat down at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea, something in the air felt different. The previous day at the bank kept playing over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the way the tellers had treated her. Their whispers, the way they assumed she didn't belong. Everything about it felt wrong. But as she sipped her tea, Alina pushed it to the back of her mind. She had learned not to let others define her, no matter how unfairly they tried. However, things were about to change faster than she could have ever imagined. The call. Later that morning, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. "Hello." A deep, calm voice answered. "Is this Miss Alina?" "Yes, this is she," Alina replied, trying to place the voice. "This is Mr. Roy, the branch manager at the bank name, where you were yesterday. I need to apologize for what happened." Alina frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm sure you noticed the behavior from the tellers," Mr. Roy continued. "I was made aware of their actions after you left. That kind of treatment is completely unacceptable, and I want to make it right." Alina felt a slight relief wash over her, but also curiosity. Why was he calling her now, so early in the morning? "I'm not calling to just apologize," Mr. Roy added, his voice lowering. "I need to tell you something important. There's something you might not know about the bank's policies." Alina's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Miss Alina, do you know who owns this bank?" His voice held an edge of respect now, almost as if he were waiting for her response carefully. Alina paused. She had heard rumors about the bank's history, about its founder who had made a fortune, but no one ever mentioned details to her directly. Why would they? She wasn't in that world. "No," she answered truthfully. "I'm just here to deposit my money." Mr. Roy seemed to hesitate, then sighed. "Miss Alina, the founder of this bank is your father." Alina was silent. She felt the words sink in slowly, but they didn't make sense. "My father?" "Yes," Mr. Roy said. "Your father built this bank from the ground up. He's a businessman who changed the financial landscape of this city, and he made sure that everyone who worked here followed the principles of integrity and respect." Alina's mind was spinning. "Wait, my father owns the bank. How? How is that possible?" She couldn't understand. Her father had always kept a low profile. He was a humble man, always working behind the scenes, doing business with quiet authority. But she had never connected him to something as big as this bank. She never asked, and he never volunteered the information. He had always kept their family life separate from his career. "I'm sorry you had to learn this way, Miss Alina," Mr. Roy continued. "But the truth is, many people, including those tellers, have no idea who you are. And because of that, they assume the worst." The truth revealed. Alina sat down on the edge of her bed, trying to absorb the shock. Her hands shook slightly as she thought about the people in the bank, the way they had looked at her, the way they had mocked her. And now, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Her father, the quiet man who never boasted, never revealed his wealth, had created this bank from the ground up. He had never let the outside world know just how powerful he truly was. Alina realized that for her entire life, she had been living in his shadow without even knowing it. But that wasn't the part that hurt the most. What hurt was how the world treated people based on what they saw. People like her, dressed simply, speaking softly, living modestly, were always dismissed, always looked down upon. And for the first time, Alina saw that her father's wealth could have protected her from that kind of treatment. "I don't want any special treatment," she finally said, her voice firm. "I'm not my father's shadow. I'm Alina. I want to be treated like anyone else." "I understand," Mr. Roy said gently, "and we will make sure this never happens again. But please, I want to invite you back to the bank. I think you should meet with the staff and share your story. It's important that they understand who you are and what you stand for." Alina thought for a moment. She could feel the weight of his request. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. Respect for herself, for her family, and for the values that mattered. "I'll think about it," she said, still processing everything. The offer. Before they hung up, Mr. Roy added one last thing. "Miss Alina, I know this may seem overwhelming, but I want to assure you that we're committed to doing the right thing. We don't want this kind of misunderstanding to happen again, and we would be honored to have you involved in shaping how we treat our customers moving forward." Alina took a deep breath. Her mind was racing. She could already hear the voices of the tellers in her head, their whispers, their laughter. But now she had the chance to change everything. She wasn't just going to let this slide. She had a voice, and she was going to use it. She hung up the phone with a sense of resolve she hadn't felt before. The world had underestimated her. They had judged her based on nothing more than her appearance. But now, Alina knew the truth. Her father's name was important, but her own voice was about to be heard, loud and clear. Suspense twist. As she sat back in her chair, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her best friend. It read, "Alina, did you see the bank's latest tweet? They just posted a photo of you. They've already tagged you as the daughter of the founder." Alina's heart raced. This wasn't just about a few tellers anymore. The world was about to find out who she really was. But was she ready? Alina stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the buildings. But inside, her mind was in chaos. The conversation with Mr. Roy kept playing over and over in her head. But now it was even more complicated. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her best friend, Sarah. "Alina, the bank's going viral. There's a photo of you now. People are starting to talk. They're saying you're the heiress." Her heart dropped. She wasn't prepared for this. She had just learned the truth about her father's bank, and now the world was going to find out too. She hadn't even told her closest friends about the wealth her father controlled. To her, it didn't matter. What mattered was who she was, not what her father had built. But now, the world was about to see her differently, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. The media storm. By the time Alina arrived at the cafe where she worked part-time, it felt like the entire city knew who she was. The moment she stepped inside, her coworkers looked at her with a mix of curiosity and awe. One of them, Jenny, whispered, "Alina, are you really the daughter of the owner of bank name?" Alina nodded slowly, her throat tight. "I guess so." Jenny, who was usually full of energy, stared at her wide-eyed. "I had no idea. Why didn't you tell anyone? You could have been, like, on top of the world by now." Alina didn't have an answer. She had never wanted to be seen as a rich girl, never wanted the attention that came with her father's wealth. She was just a normal girl working at a cafe, trying to make her way in the world. But now, it seemed, the world had found her. And it wasn't a world she recognized. The teller's panic. Back at the bank, things were just as chaotic. The tellers who had mocked Alina the day before were now in full panic mode. Word was spreading fast, and they were afraid of the fallout. They had no idea who she was when she walked into the bank that morning. They had treated her like any other poor customer, assuming she didn't belong in such a prestigious place. But now they knew. Alina was the daughter of the bank's founder, and they had embarrassed themselves in front of her. The two tellers, the ones who had whispered and laughed behind her back, were summoned to the manager's office. Mr. Roy stood behind his desk, his face serious. "I want you to explain yourselves," he said, his voice cold. The tellers exchanged nervous glances. The one who had been more vocal, the young man who had been dismissive of Alina, swallowed hard. "We didn't know," he muttered. "We didn't know who she was." Mr. Roy's gaze was unforgiving. "That's not an excuse. You treated her like dirt. You mocked her. And now the entire world is watching." "I didn't mean to," the teller started, but Mr. Roy cut him off. "No, this goes beyond a simple mistake. You made an assumption based on her appearance, and you were wrong. I've seen the footage from yesterday. You laughed at her. You humiliated her." The two tellers sat in silence, their faces red with shame. They had always prided themselves on their professionalism, but in that moment, they realized how quickly things could spiral out of control. The viral post. Back at home, Alina watched the messages flood in. Her phone buzzed continuously, and each notification brought a new shock. People were tagging her in posts, calling her the heiress, the boss's daughter, and many other names that made her skin crawl. But there was one post that stood out. It was a video from a local news channel. In the video, one of the tellers, the one who had been most mocking of her, was on camera, apologizing for his behavior. "I never knew who she was," he said, his face pale. "But I should have treated her with respect, regardless of what she looked like. I'm sorry." Alina stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. The tellers were apologizing now, but their words felt hollow. The damage was already done. The humiliation had already taken root. The decision. By evening, Alina had had enough. She couldn't let this go on. She had been judged, mocked, and humiliated by people who didn't even know her, and now they were playing the victim. But she wasn't going to let this slide. The next morning, she called Mr. Roy. "I need to come in. I want to talk to the staff. It's time for them to hear the truth. I'm not just a rich girl. I'm not just my father's daughter. I want them to see me for who I really am." Mr. Roy agreed immediately. "Of course, Miss Alina. We'll set it up. The entire staff needs to hear your story." Alina knew this wouldn't be easy, but it was time to take control. It was time to stop letting the world define her by her appearance, by her father's legacy. She had a voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it. The bank's response. At the bank, the atmosphere was tense. The tellers who had once thought of themselves as above others were now quietly waiting for Alina to speak. They knew what they had done. They knew they had hurt her. Alina entered the bank confidently, her heart pounding but her expression steady. She looked at the tellers, the manager, and the other employees gathered in the room. "I'm not here to make anyone feel bad," she began. "I'm here because I want you to understand that we don't judge people by how they look, by how much money they have, or by what they wear. I came in yesterday just like anyone else would. I didn't come in asking for special treatment, but I was treated as if I didn't belong here." Her voice shook slightly, but it wasn't fear. It was passion. She was finally standing up for herself. "My father built this bank with hard work, yes. But I'm not my father. I'm Alina. And I deserve respect, just like anyone else." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. And for the first time, Alina felt that the world wasn't looking at her with judgment. They were looking at her with a new kind of respect. Suspense twist. As Alina finished speaking, she turned to leave the room. But before she could walk out, Mr. Roy's voice stopped her. "Miss Alina," he said, "I think you need to know something else. The tellers have all asked to meet with you, to apologize in person." Alina paused, her hand resting on the door handle. She wasn't sure what to feel. They had humiliated her. They had mocked her. But maybe this was her chance to change everything. She took a deep breath and turned around. "I'll hear them out," she said, stepping back into the room. "But only if they mean it." Alina stood at the front of the room, the weight of her words still hanging in the air. She had spoken her truth. Her voice now echoed in the minds of everyone who had witnessed her speech. Her resolve was stronger than ever, but there was still something lingering in the back of her mind. Would the tellers really change? Could they be trusted again? The room was silent, tense with the anticipation of what would happen next. Mr. Roy had already gathered the staff to listen to Alina's message, but now it was time for the tellers to face her. As the doors opened and the two tellers walked in, Alina took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling, but she forced herself to stand tall. The young man, the one who had laughed at her the day before, stepped forward first. His face was pale, his eyes filled with guilt. Behind him, the female teller who had been quiet during the whole ordeal stood, looking equally remorseful. Mr. Roy, standing beside Alina, gave a subtle nod. "You may begin," he said. The young man cleared his throat, his voice shaking as he spoke. "Miss Alina, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I didn't know who you were. I didn't even stop to think about how my words could hurt someone. It was wrong, and I deeply regret it. I've learned a hard lesson." Alina listened intently, her eyes fixed on him. She could see the genuine remorse in his eyes, but she wasn't sure if that was enough. They had humiliated her in front of everyone. They had assumed she was just another customer. The truth was, they didn't even give her a chance. The female teller stepped forward next. "I was wrong too," she said softly. "I didn't stand up for you. I should have. I've been part of the problem by staying silent. I should have known better. I promise I'll never make that mistake again." The apology was sincere, but Alina could still feel the sting of what had happened. They couldn't erase her feelings just by saying sorry. It would take more than words. Much more. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I understand that you're sorry, and that's a good first step. But this isn't just about me. This is about how you treat everyone who walks through these doors. How you make them feel, whether they have a lot of money or not. What matters is respect, not assumptions." She paused, her gaze shifting between the two tellers and the rest of the staff in the room. "This is a lesson I had to learn the hard way. The world will judge you based on what they see, not who you are. But you have the power to change that. You have the power to treat everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of their background." The room was still. Alina's words were resonating with everyone present. She could feel it. The shift. They were beginning to understand. The turning point. After a long silence, Mr. Roy spoke up. "Miss Alina is right. This incident has been a wake-up call for all of us. We will be implementing new training programs to ensure that this never happens again. Our staff will learn to respect every customer, no matter who they are. It's not just about financial status. It's about basic human dignity." Alina nodded, her eyes softening. She wasn't expecting perfection. She wasn't expecting the world to change overnight. But this was a start, a real one. They weren't just offering empty apologies. They were taking action. "I'm glad to hear that," Alina said, her voice steady. "But I'll be watching. I'll make sure that the changes you're making are real. I don't want this to be forgotten. I don't want this to happen again to anyone else." The young man, who had spoken first, nodded eagerly. "We won't forget. I promise." Alina turned toward the door. As she stepped out, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been judged or mistreated because of their appearance or background. She wasn't going to let their mistake define her, and now they were forced to confront their own. The first step to change. Later that afternoon, Alina sat down with Mr. Roy in his office. He had asked her to stay for a moment, and she had agreed, curious about what he wanted to say. Alina sat alone in her apartment, staring at the business card Mr. Roy had given her. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, questions, and possibilities. She had always felt like the world saw her as just another person with a famous name. But now it felt like she was finally being seen for who she truly was. But was she ready to take on the responsibility that came with it? Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Sarah. "Alina, you're all over the news again. People are saying you're going to be the next big thing at that bank. Have you made your decision yet?" Alina sighed, feeling the weight of her options. She wasn't just being offered a job. She was being handed a platform, a chance to shape the future of the bank, and perhaps her own. But with that power came the pressure to succeed, to prove she was more than just her father's daughter. The media frenzy. The moment Alina's story hit the news, everything changed. Headlines read, "Harris to Bank Dynasty takes stand against mistreatment. Will she lead the change?" Social media exploded with mixed reactions. Some hailed her as a hero, while others saw her as nothing more than an entitled rich kid trying to make amends. But Alina wasn't bothered by the opinions. What mattered was that the conversation had begun. People were talking about the importance of respect, equality, and fair treatment in places of power. That's what she had hoped for all along. Still, the media scrutiny was intense. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, some with admiration, others with curiosity. Even her old co-workers from the cafe had reached out, offering their congratulations. But despite all the attention, Alina felt more alone than ever. The bank's next move. Back at the bank, Mr. Roy and the board of directors were waiting for Alina's response. They had seen the public reaction, and they knew they had a rare opportunity to change the public image of the bank. Alina had proven herself to be more than just the Harris. She was someone with a voice, someone who could influence change from within. The board had been impressed by the way Alina had handled the situation, especially her firm stance on respect and equality. They knew she had the potential to take the bank into a new era, where customer service and employee training weren't just about profits, but about treating people with dignity. That afternoon, Alina received a call from Mr. Roy. His voice was calm but urgent. "Miss Alina, we've been following the media coverage, and we're ready to make you an offer you can't refuse. We want you to help us create a new division at the bank. You'll be in charge of customer relations and employee development. You'll have the power to shape the culture of this institution." Alina's heart raced. This wasn't just a job offer. This was her chance to make a real difference. But was she ready for such a big responsibility? Could she really live up to the expectations? "I'll need some time to think about it," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in her mind. "Take all the time you need," Mr. Roy said. "But know this, the bank is looking to you to lead us into the future. This is more than just about fixing past mistakes. It's about building something better." The family conversation. That night, Alina decided to talk to her father about the offer. Her father, who had always been a quiet and serious man, sat across from her in their spacious dining room, a place that had always felt more like a museum than a home. He looked up from his newspaper when she entered the room. "What's on your mind, Alina?" he asked, his tone gentle but curious. "I got an offer from the bank today," she said, taking a deep breath. "Mr. Roy wants me to help reshape the bank's culture, to lead a new division focused on customer relations and employee development." Her father raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You've thought this through?" Alina nodded. "I want to do something that matters, something that isn't just about the money or the family name. I want to make a difference in how people are treated, in how businesses operate. But I don't know if I'm ready. It's a huge responsibility, and I don't want to fail." Her father leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "Alina, you've always had the potential to do great things. I didn't build this bank so that it could only serve the rich. I built it because I wanted it to be a place that could change lives. If you're ready to lead this change, I'll support you. But you have to be ready to give it everything you've got." Alina looked at her father, feeling a sense of pride and fear mixed together. He was right. This was her moment to step up, to lead in a way she had never done before. She wasn't just her father's daughter anymore. She had to prove she was more than that. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. The decision. The next day, Alina made the call to Mr. Roy. "I'll take the job," she said, her decision made. Excellent, Mr. Roy replied, his voice full of excitement. We've been waiting for you to say that. There's a lot of work ahead, but I know you're the one to lead us. Alina smiled to herself. It wasn't going to be easy, and she knew there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The suspense twist. As she sat down at her desk in the newly established division, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play. The media frenzy had died down, but whispers of a bigger challenge started to circulate around the office. Some people didn't want change. Some were afraid of losing the control they had in the old system. Alina was about to find out that the biggest battle wouldn't be with the outside world. It would be within the bank itself. The first few weeks in her new role were a whirlwind for Alina. The excitement of starting fresh and having the power to make real change was invigorating. But soon, she began to see the cracks in the system that were much harder to fix than she had anticipated. Alina's new division was meant to overhaul how the bank treated its customers and employees. The goal was to create an environment where respect, fairness, and genuine care for people were at the core of every decision. However, not everyone in the bank was on board with the changes. The resistance within. At first, the resistance was subtle. There were quiet murmurs in the hallways, glances exchanged behind closed doors, and passive-aggressive comments in meetings. Some of the senior executives, who had been with the bank for years, didn't take kindly to Alina's sudden rise to power. They saw her as someone who had been handed everything on a silver platter, someone who didn't truly understand the inner workings of the business world. One afternoon, Alina was in a meeting with the bank's head of operations, Mr. Caldwell, a man in his late 50s with years of experience. He was a veteran of the corporate world, and his no-nonsense approach had earned him respect, or fear, depending on how you looked at it. Miss Alina, Mr. Caldwell began, his tone cold, I'm not sure you understand the full scope of what you're asking for. The changes you're proposing are idealistic, but in the real world, things don't work that way. We can't just throw out decades of business practices and expect everything to run smoothly. Alina felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She had expected pushback, but not like this. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I'm not asking to throw out decades of experience, Mr. Caldwell, she said calmly. What I'm asking for is that we listen to people, our customers, our employees. We can't keep doing things the same way because that's how we've always done them. Times have changed, and so must we. Mr. Caldwell scoffed. You talk about change, but you don't know what it takes to keep this bank running. You're young. You don't understand the pressure we face every day to keep things profitable. Alina stared at him, feeling the weight of his words. It was true. She didn't understand all the intricacies of running a multi-million-dollar business, but she understood people. She understood that if you didn't treat people right, everything else would eventually fall apart. Profit isn't just about numbers, she said, her voice firm. It's about the relationships we build. If we want our customers to trust us, we need to show them that we respect them, no matter who they are. Mr. Caldwell didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at her, his eyes hardening. It was clear he didn't agree with her approach, and Alina knew this wouldn't be the last time she faced resistance like this. The backroom deals. It wasn't just Mr. Caldwell. There were others, members of the board, mid-level managers, and even a few of the bank's most influential clients, who saw Alina's push for change as a threat to their status quo. They had built their empires on the foundation of exclusivity and control, and now, a young woman was coming in, shaking things up, questioning their methods. Alina soon discovered that some of these individuals were plotting behind the scenes. Whispers of backroom deals, secret meetings, and attempts to undermine her authority started to surface. At first, she brushed it off as rumors. But when she received an anonymous letter warning her to stay in her lane, she realized that the opposition was more organized than she had anticipated. The letter was simple but chilling. You're playing a dangerous game, Alina. This isn't just about you. You've made powerful enemies. Think carefully about your next move." Alina's hands shook as she read the letter. She had expected resistance, but this was something different. Whoever had sent this wasn't just trying to convince her to back down. They were trying to intimidate her. A moment of doubt. That night, Alina lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She had never been one to back down from a challenge. But this was different. The people who were against her were powerful, influential. They had connections that could make her life very difficult, even if they didn't outright destroy her career. She thought about her father. He had built this bank from the ground up, but he had done it with a clear sense of purpose. Alina had always admired that about him. But now she was faced with a choice. Would she follow in his footsteps, or would she forge her own path, regardless of the obstacles? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "Hey, are you okay? I saw the news. People are saying that some of the board members are trying to push you out. What's going on?" Alina felt a wave of frustration. Sarah didn't know everything that was happening behind the scenes, but it didn't matter. Alina wasn't going to let anyone push her around. She typed back a quick response. "I'm fine, just a little tired, but I'll figure it out." But deep down, Alina knew that this wasn't just about tiredness. She was in the middle of a battle, one that might not have a clear winner. And if she didn't find a way to unite the people around her, she might lose everything. The suspense twist. The next day, Alina received a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Caldwell. His voice on the other end was no longer cold, but somewhat apologetic. "Miss Alina, I've been thinking. Maybe there's more to your vision than I first realized. I'd like to meet and discuss some of your ideas further." Alina's heart skipped a beat. Was this a trick? Or had Mr. Caldwell had a change of heart? Could she really trust him, or was he trying to manipulate her into a position of weakness? As she hung up the phone, she felt the tension rise once again. Was Mr. Caldwell trying to buy her trust, or was this the beginning of an alliance that could help her shift the tide? The days following Alina's conversation with Mr. Caldwell were filled with uncertainty. She didn't know whether to trust him or not. But one thing was clear: she had to be cautious. People in power were not easily swayed, and any misstep could cost her everything she had worked for. Yet, despite the tension, she had a growing sense that this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. A meeting of minds. Alina agreed to meet with Mr. Caldwell the next afternoon. The meeting was to take place at a small private cafe on the outskirts of the city, a neutral ground away from the prying eyes of the bank's employees and board members. As she sat down at the table, she studied Mr. Caldwell, trying to gauge his intentions. His once harsh demeanor seemed subdued, and there was something almost apologetic in his posture as he looked at her. "Miss Alina," he began, "I owe you an apology. My response to your ideas was dismissive. I see now that you have the potential to bring real change to this place. I've been here a long time, and maybe I've grown too comfortable. But I can't deny that your approach has merit. There are things we can do better, and I'm willing to help you make that happen." Alina was stunned. She had expected a more guarded response, or even a continuation of the opposition she had faced. But here he was, acknowledging her vision and offering his support. It was both a relief and a warning. She couldn't let her guard down completely. "Why now?" she asked cautiously. "Why the change of heart?" Mr. Caldwell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how things need to change, and I realized I've been part of the problem. The bank has been too focused on the bottom line, forgetting that people are what keep it running. You're right, but there are still powerful forces in the bank who will fight this every step of the way." Alina's heart sank. She had expected this. Change was never easy, and it was never without resistance. "So, what's your plan? How can we work together to shift the power back to the people?" Caldwell leaned forward. "We need to make a move, publicly. We need to show the board and our customers that we're serious about change. We need to overhaul our approach to leadership, our customer service policies, and how we treat our employees. It will take time, but with the right messaging, we can win their support. Alina thought for a moment. It was bold, but it was also risky. If they acted too soon or without full backing, it could backfire. But with Caldwell's experience and her vision, they had the potential to succeed. "All right," she said, "let's do it. But we need to make sure everyone in the bank knows we're united. This has to be a full-force effort." Mr. Caldwell nodded. "Agreed. I'll make some calls. We'll get this moving." The unexpected ally. As the plan to reshape the bank slowly took form, Alina's life outside of the office continued to be affected by the media frenzy. But now, there was a new element in the narrative, a surprising ally. Mr. Caldwell's change of heart had made waves, and some of the board members who had been skeptical began to take notice. A few of them had started reaching out to Alina, offering their support in private. They, too, saw the writing on the wall. The old ways of doing business were becoming outdated. Alina wasn't sure what to make of it. Was this genuine support, or were they simply trying to save face before things got worse? She knew she had to tread carefully. Trust was something that had to be earned, not given freely, especially in a place as cutthroat as the corporate world. One afternoon, as Alina was reviewing reports in her office, she received a message from an unexpected source. "Sarah." The message was short but cryptic. "You won't believe this. I've heard rumors that someone high up is trying to bring down the bank from within. It's not over yet." Alina's heart skipped a beat. She had known that there were enemies at the bank, but this was something different. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to stop her. They were trying to destroy everything she had built. She needed to act fast before things spiraled out of control. The battle for control. The situation escalated quickly. Within days, Alina learned that a faction of the board, led by a few influential members, was working against her. They were organizing a vote of no confidence in her leadership, planning to push her out of the bank entirely. The news hit her like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just a challenge now. It was a full-blown attack on everything she stood for. She immediately called a meeting with Mr. Caldwell. They needed to act quickly and decisively. Time was running out. "You were right," Alina said, her voice sharp with determination. "There are people who will do anything to stop us. We need to expose them for what they are. Selfish, power-hungry individuals who don't care about the bank's future, just their own." Caldwell looked grim. "We have to be careful. If we make a move too soon, we risk losing the support of those who are still on our side." Alina nodded. "We'll take them down one by one. We need to make sure the board sees what's really going on behind closed doors. I have one more trick up my sleeve." The final confrontation. The plan was set into motion. Alina and Mr. Caldwell worked together to gather evidence, leaked emails, shady business deals, and secret meetings that exposed the corrupt actions of the rogue board members. With this ammunition in hand, they went to the media. The public outcry was immediate. People were shocked to learn about the underhanded tactics that some of the bank's top executives had been using. The media picked up on the story, and soon, the pressure on the board became too much to bear. Members of the board who had once opposed Alina now saw that their only option was to back her if they wanted to keep their positions. The vote was held. The corrupt faction was ousted, and Alina's position was solidified. She had won the battle, but the war wasn't over yet. There was still much work to be done. The twist. As the dust settled, Alina stood in her office, looking out the window. For a moment, everything felt like it had fallen into place. But then she received an email, a mysterious one with no sender. The message was simple: "You've won this battle, but there's always someone watching. Don't let your guard down. The game is far from over." Her heart sank. The fight for control wasn't over. There were still shadows lurking in the corners, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Alina wasn't afraid. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to stop now.